Video is unavailable. Maybe it's available now. All right, gang, I'm going to assume I'm live. If you could confirm that, that would be awesome on YouTube. We've got something really crazy and exciting and fun to definitely talk about today. And we're going to see how it goes. I think it's going to be kind of fascinating. So what I want you to do is to hang in there with me and think, because what I'm about to do, I hope, is I'm going to break your brain. That would be my goal. And if I do, we're going to put it back together. And when we put your brain back together, everything's going to be awesome. So I'm posting on YouTube how to join us live on Zoom, which would be preferable. And otherwise, I'm going to pretend that all this is working delightfully well. So if you can put in the chat that you're there, it's great. Let me talk to you about this question about personality, right? So we're wrestling with, what do you do? And I assume you can hear me. If somebody could confirm that, that'd be super. But what do you do when your child's personality starts being a real challenge to what's going on? Have you ever wrestled with that before? So you have children, and then they react. I've got a great question from somebody, a similar thing, where a child really wants to go to public school because it sounds like it'll be Disney World or Chuck E. Cheese all day long. Well, this whole thing about personality, I want to get into, and I want to tell you exactly why I think this stuff matters. So let's start with the nature of insight. Okay, so when you get an insight, a real insight, it can change everything in literally a moment, transformative. One of the favorite examples I like to use is ulcers. So stomach ulcers, you've heard about these things, may have experienced one, but the way stomach ulcers work forever is they're caused by what? Way it was always taught was it was caused by stress, and it's still thought to be caused by stress. But a researcher at that time in Australia, and then got to the States eventually and won Nobel Prize or something like that for it, realized or discovered that it's a Heliobacteria priori, or whatever it's called. It's a bacteria that's actually in the stomach that's causing the hole in the stomach. And then a hole in the stomach, guess what? It kind of stresses you out. So the actual game is that they're looking at people being stressed with a hole in their stomach. And so they think the hole was caused by the stress, when actually the hole caused the stress. In logic, they call this post hoc ergo propter hoc. And so it's this thing after this, therefore because of this, and you have a wrong cause and effect and blah, blah, blah. Well, the moment we understood that, then you can start prescribing antibiotics and Pepto-Bismol, which they'd been doing for the same thing in pigs for 40 years, as a veterinarian friend of mine told me. I tell you that story because this is what we're up to. With everything in your life, every challenge, you're looking for an insight. You know, there was a time, and I remember it because we were kind of the second group that came in, where people decided to homeschool. And it was radically bizarre. Like, it was a thought no one had had. Like, really? You could actually teach your child at home? That's just bizarre. And no way to understand it. A lot of people are still that way. But when you get an insight, it changes everything. I can remember as a kid, a youngster, I was a bit of a crybaby. Part of it is because I understand Dad picked on me. He liked to see me get mad, bring in front of his friends, and they're playing cards, and he'd get me irritated. And I'd get so mad in the face and all, and they just thought it was so cute. But as a result of what I started doing was I would cry when I'd get upset. And I'd cry and I'd get upset. And then they started mocking me for being a crybaby. I mean, it's Alabama. It's how you did it back then. And so they would make fun of me for crying and get on to me. And as a result, that'd make me what? Cry. So one day I'm playing by myself out in our like ditch. It had trees in it all. It was like a little canyon to me. And I fell off something and I scraped my hands and my knees on rocks and all. And I looked at it, scraping my hands and knees. And I looked at it and then I noticed I wasn't crying. And in that moment, it's about probably a 5-year-old, that moment, I went, oh, I don't have to cry. And since then, I've never cried. No, not true at all. But since then, I've been much more balanced about the whole thing than busy crying. So I want to share something with you about personality, because this is about human nature, and this is about parenting. This is about your kids, and it's about you and your own growth, etc. And what I want to share about personality when we're looking at a child and we're thinking in our homeschool, they don't like this, they do like this, they're not that kind of person, they're right brain, they're left brain, they're introverted, they're extroverted, this child is a hypersensitive, this child's about math, this child needs to be with other people, this child's a loner, all those things we do. And so then we're caught usually in a negotiation of trying to, how do we get the child to do this and like this, etc. So here's what I want to tell you. The insight that I would like to convince you of, and let me share, I'm certified on a B class level. I can order personality tests. I've gone through psychometrics. I've been certified. I've taught maybe 1,000 people personality, all kinds of personality tests, DISC and Colby's and MBTI's and Big Fives and Taylor Johnson's, and it just goes down the list, all these things. So here's what I'm going to tell you. After all these years of wrestling with it, I'm convinced there's no such thing as personality. That's not actually a thing. It's a thing they've made up. And once you get caught in that made up thing, then you start in this confirmation bias confirming it. Okay. So I know I said something that's going to break your brain, but it's okay, because that's what I'm here for. And I don't actually mean there's no such thing. I'm just mean we can't test for it and we can't decide what it is. I'm much more interested in growing character. That's what we're aiming for, not personality. Because the game with personality, here's the problem. If there were such a thing, wouldn't we have one test and we wouldn't know what it is? And wouldn't it be stable? Would it not change? But here's what we all know, it changes. There's studies out there that show dramatic change from 14 to 77. We have longitudinal studies. We have so many different kinds of tests, so many different ways to test what people are like. And it doesn't last. I mean, probably the best understanding of personality is in the old Mounds Almond Joy commercial forever ago. Some days you feel like a nut, and some days you don't. So when I say this and we think this through, think about what personality is. So personality is behavior in a situation, and it's really geared to get what you want. So you're using a behavior to get something you want. That's how the game works. And what they claim, and there's not agreement. In good science, we agree, like gravity. They all kind of agree about that. Other areas that aren't agreed to are still wrestling with. Personality is like the worst of all of them, because there are zillions of tests and zillions of debates, and the test retest is terrible, and I don't want to bore you with all that. But I want you to understand that human beings are actually engaged in a behavior. Your children are, and I'm going to give you an example in a second, in a behavior because they want to get what they want. And that's not a bad thing. They want to get what they want. But they use their behavior, and you do this all the time. So a child cries, right? Or is upset about wanting something. And you say, ask nicely. Or you say, please. And the child often will do this. Please, may I have a cookie? I know my granddaughter does that. She'll go from one thing to another. Now, if personality is set, how can she even do that? How can we play? Why do all of us, when we go to a symphony, turn into introverts? You see, this thing, personality, I'm going to argue, is much more situational than it actually is built in. You can have a bent in nature. So here's a few little quotes I want you to think about. One is, a bratty child doesn't have a better way to get what they want. And that's the story of personality. A bratty child just doesn't have a better way to do it. If they learn a better way to do it, they'll use it. We know in Proverbs it says, if you want to have friends, become friendly. And people learn to be friendly. Shy people can learn to talk, basically. Chatty people can learn to shut up. Because all these things are actually character issues. We look at someone and say, well, you've got a personality dysfunction. Well, maybe you do, but you're making up what that means, what the personality means, what the dysfunction is. Somebody's deciding it. What if you just have a character flaw? Like, I don't know, you dominate situations, or you tend to lie, or you tend to blow up. You have anger. Well, that's just my personality. Really? Maybe it's your character. And what we're engaged in as homeschoolers is growing our children's character. Let me throw you another quote. So what I do is I have a little notebook. You can see it's like up to 112. It's actually up to 150 of what I call aphorisms, things I write about these topics. And I just sit and think and write them and write them and write them. And the whole reason for it is so I can think clearly, so I can renew my mind, so I can think fresh. So one I wanted to read to you is about children. Another one. So we have the bratty one. And then we have, if I can find myself. Yeah, watch this. You can absolutely shape your child's personality, and then they can reshape it again later on. Look, that's how it works. And what people are doing all their lives, they're growing and developing. There may be some tendencies, they say that, somewhat consistent, stable, but not really. That's not really what's going on. There are so many variables going into it. For example, if someone learns a skill, right? Like they learned a skill to give a speech, or a skill in selling. You can call that they learned how to be extroverted or something like that, but they learned a skill. And when you make a skill a part of the personality, it gets weird. In these tests, commonly they'll talk about those people love to read. Other people love to read. That is part of your personality. You love to read. Your personality is a reader's personality. You have a reading personality, not in places where people don't learn to read. So now we're measuring a skill and making a personality thing. So when you look at your child, here's what's going on. Your child is in the process of learning, probably in a negotiation with you, and trying to get you're trying to get your child to do things. Your child's trying to get you to do things. And so this thing is a personality negotiation. And then sometimes they get upset and they try that, and sometimes they don't. If you can grasp this, then the issue is actually learning how to help your child grow. And your child is going to grow just like you are. It's going to be based on what you want. It's about incentive. If I know what somebody wants, I can predict what their behavior is probably going to be in a certain context. And so the game is, the moment a person wants something and is clear about it, then what they're doing is they're using a temporary personality, like playing, to get it. And that's not an evil, terrible thing. It's a good thing, because what it means is you're flexible and you have choice. What personality stuff usually does to us is it dictates to us how we are, and then we try to live up to it like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And suddenly it becomes an excuse for all kinds of behavior. I'm sorry, that's my personality. Rather than what we want to focus on is character. Yeah, they may have a bent, they may have an orientation, they may have to learn some things, but they can learn. And the more you catch on that personality is not set, but it's situational, then you can start looking at your child and you can start figuring out, how do I help this child grow? So if you catch on to that and the fluid and pliable nature of personality, that it's situational. And by the way, I'm not alone in this. There are experts out there. I'm not making this up. I'm just figuring it out. And the reason I figured it out is forever ago, I took a test called the DISC test, DISC, dominance, inspiration, steadiness, compliance. And I scored and I kind of learned about it. And then later, I was still practicing and learning. And so I took it thinking about who I was at home. And then I took it thinking who I was at the office. And they came out different. And the literature says it will. And that's when I quit liking the DISC, because I want something reliable I can count on. And what I've found with employees and people, here's what I can count on. I can count on skills and character. This personality stuff doesn't predict much of anything. They claim it does, but not in the data, not in the statistics. So when you look at your child as a pliable human being, and when they grow up, this is important, realize they're still growing and changing, because they're going to do some things and be some ways you may not be thrilled about because it's their life. And so what you're looking at, why are you like this? You weren't this person, or, you're not the person I married, or I'm not, and it's like, of course not. In any given moment, in any given situation, you're going to be a certain thing. You're putting on a personality to get what you want. So if you can start working with your child, focused on what you want, and getting them to get a vision for what they need to want, and then how their personality takes care of that. I have a son who self-diagnosed himself as on the spectrum when he was a kid, as on the spectrum, Asperger's or something like that. He said, it just sounds like me. And I went, not really. And then I looked at it recently and went, he may have had some points. But I remember distinctly he was struggling when he was in like 9th grade or so, or 8th. And he said, I just don't have friends. I don't know how it works. I think I've told you this story, but I don't know how friendship works. And as a result, Jody had the idea to say, why don't you read this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People? And then I said, yeah, come back and talk to us. And so he took the book and he went off. And by the way, that book was originally YMCA. It had all kinds of stuff about God and Christ in it. And they kind of took that stuff out to make it more appealing, broadly secular. But he goes and reads this book about friendship. And he comes back 2 days later and his eyes are like this big. And he goes, oh, I totally understand friendship now. And, ever since then, he's been great, friendly, makes friends, has long-term friends, just because of the power of that single insight. The moment you get that, if you look at your child and go, okay, they're using a personality. They have a lot of them. I do that. I think about public speaking Fred. I think about friendly Fred. I think about fun Fred. I think about, if I'm doing communion, I think about serious Fred, because we don't need to do jokes during communion or funerals. This is a thing. And so I have to use a different mindset and a different personality to get what I want, which is I want people to take communion and, appreciate the moment. So if you can start looking at your child this way, you can see personality is something to develop. They're not stuck in it. They may need to learn how to deal with stuff. But the more you think they're stuck with their personality, the more they're excused, and the more you're going to battle with it. And if you can learn, and I'm going to show you in a minute how to do that, if you can learn more about how to transform what they want, you'll see that they'll develop skills and get much more effective at how they interact and pull things off. Whew, that was a little long, and there's really a whole lot more. But that's a good start a discussion. Welcome to ask questions about that, anything about homeschooling. Jody is in charge of a big women's breakfast at church tomorrow, so she's busy making taco arrangements or whatever she's doing. So if you have questions, post them in the chat. If you're on YouTube, if you want to join us over here on, got to get all my names straight, on Zoom, do that. If we can talk, that's great. You don't have to show your camera. You're welcome to, but that's kind of what we're aiming for. So, kind of questions are in your mind? I have one someone wrote me, so I got to back up, but you're here, and I'd much rather enjoy that. So, Kenneth Durrell shared question. I can't do video, so that's fine. My oldest, sorry, I can't do video chat currently. My oldest son, 13, struggles to verbally, I guess struggles verbally. Not sure if it's anxiety or something else, but he has difficulty speaking fluently. Okay, so let's think about that. So in speaking fluently, some of that is, like, for example, I would be curious if your son, 13-year-old, is any good at speaking, is reading out loud. So reading out loud is a very helpful thing. Usually what's going on, it's just like a lot of people aren't used to writing fluently. So what we train them is to learn to get out of their head. Now, I'm not saying he may not have a language processing issue. That could happen. You can get him tested. But in general, what people are trying to do when they're not finding the words is they think there's a right way to say it. And they're caught up trying to say it just right. So they're trying to get it right and trying to really control the situation because they don't want to be embarrassed, like you said, anxiety. In writing, so in writing, what we get people to do is to think in stages, like, okay, get help, make great. And it's very similar in speaking. In fact, they're kind of related, using words and all. So in writing, if you can get in your mind that I just want to say it okay, but I can correct it. Well, it's the same with speaking. You can do the same thing. When you say something and you hear yourself say it and you misspoke, hand me the, potato peeler, and you go, oh, I meant to say notebook. You can correct it. It's not a big deal. But what goes on is if you're more perfectionistic, then you don't have confidence. And so you try to control things. And if you say it wrong, you'll feel dumb. You'll feel like I did in second grade when I forgot how to spell the word the, and I had to ask. Mortified, but you can get over this stuff. And so some of that is learning to practice what we call thinking on your feet, learning to practice talking out loud, learning to practice telling a story. Because in my understanding, like Emerson said, the greater part of courage is just having done it before. So getting him in these activities of learning to read out loud so he gets used to his voice, and learning to make up stories. Like, y'all can even go around, like, once upon a time there's a small boy, your turn, and he climbed a giant hill, my turn, and found a small red bucket at the very top, and inside the bucket was, and then it's his turn, a moth and a diamond and a pair of scissors. I don't know, I'm just making it up. But is he practiced that and he discovers that he's not harmed by it, he can get more confident. He can also learn, like most of us will, how to say phrases. You start learning, like telling a joke, and you know how to tell it once you've told it enough times. So you can have a repertoire of phrases and interactions, etc. But by and large, this kind of relates to the personality thing. So we're caught sort of in a world where he needs to kind of pretend he's verbal, like play at it, like, because that's how we all learn, children learn. But you can play act, which is putting on a temporary personality for a moment. It's a character, it's acting. Yeah, acting, reacting. And so I would really encourage you to do things like that just engage him in talking out loud and getting to his voice, used to his voice. A lot of people don't read out loud very well, and that's because it's a skill. And once you develop the skill and you work at it, you can be good at it, just like anything. And if he takes this on as a skill to learn, then he's going to be golden. And what you want to say over and over again to your kids on these things is, everything's hard before it's easy, but it's easy once you know how. You just kind of run that over and over again, and give them a vision for it. So That's the thing. I'll tell you something else with people who are slow verbally. When you ask them a question, don't be impatient. Just sit there. I'll count to 10. You leave a vacuum in the air so they can fill it with some words, because that's what they're up to. They're trying to solve. All right. What other questions are on your mind or insights? So I wrote the question above, email earlier. Oh, good. I'll get to that in just a moment. Heather, my son is in 6th grade, but reads at a 4th grade level. Today we started with the reading program, Step 1 Pieces. Went really well, so I believe that we're on the right track. How do you feel about, is that open more? How do you feel about my son reading to me and help when he gets stuck? Or should he read on his own? Yeah, so that's a good question. So what you're trying to do with their reading or any skill is skill development is about, are they doing better today than they were doing last week, right? Are they making progress? And you don't want to think constant improvement, kind of rethinking that. It's more consistent improvement. So constant is like every day and there's always pressure. We're not trying to do that at all, right? What we're trying to do with reading is get them to grow in their vocabulary and grow in their understanding, the ability to put phrases together, see relationships and ideas. So our reading course goes through all that. But you having them read out loud to you is good. Them reading on their own is good. So any of these things that work, but you follow the program. I mean, human beings are wired generally to be able to read. It's something everybody can learn. So anything you find to be practice is helpful. Here's what I would suggest more than anything on reading is if you help them, which is completely understandable and totally fine, help them by going through a page or a passage. And once they get it read once, get them to keep reading that page, either to themselves and or out loud. And if you do that one page over and over again to where they get really good at it, or a book and they get really good at it, that's going to boost their confidence and they're going to put together the whole thing. This is why when I say you do essay writing when they're 14, you're wanting to help them put together one really great essay. It may take weeks and weeks, but one really good essay. They've learned the form and the way it goes, but they keep working at it, build illustrations. And when they finally get one essay written that's awesome, they'll know what an essay is supposed to look like. When a child can finally read one page at their reading level and read it really well, they get what they're up to. And so that vision kind of helps set them in motion. So that would be at least where I would start trying. But, your children, your situation, they all vary. It's your experiment. Keep trying it and measure if it's working. But these are the things I've found to be helpful. Lucy says, thank you for the story on your son who's struggling making friends. Going to have my kiddos listen to How to Win Friends on Audible. They love audiobooks. Good. My sweet 9-year-old the other day asked a new girl on her softball team if she wanted to be friends. The girl said no. She was hurt, but didn't ruminate out loud on it for too long, just that night. How can I revisit that with her to make sure she knows it's no big deal? Okay, let me just finish reading it because I'm already excited about this. I told her I loved her bravery to put herself out there and ask. I said, probably wouldn't be brave enough to do that. How can I check to see if she's okay without constantly having her recall rejection if she's moved on? Thank you. Okay. So, so I don't know the story about how well they knew each other. But so what you're wanting to do is all she needs is a different strategy. Just like I said about bratty kids. Bratty kids are bratty because they don't know another strategy to get what they want. If you show them what to do to get what they want, most people won't do brattiness. It doesn't serve a good purpose. They just don't have a better tool. When the only tool is you got a hammer, you hit everything. So we're aiming for something different here. So ask a new girl. Okay, so let's think about this. Like, imagine you could tell your daughter, imagine if your daddy, the first time I met him, said, "Hey, you want to get married?" What do you think I would have said? I didn't even know him. I would have said no, because I don't know him. I don't know anything about him. So it's like you were brave, just a little too fast. So in other words, friendship even grows and blossoms just like a flower. They don't just always pop out. Usually there's a little bud, and then it opens up some, then it opens up more, just picking up a analogy or way to frame it. And so if you think of friendship that way, what you want to do is befriend them, do some nice things, cheer for them, listen to them, be friendly, whatever that is, but give it some time, because they've got their own discomforts and worries and whatever else too. And, you know, they are in the process of learning and figuring out, are we a match? Do we like the same things, etc.? And so adding a time component would be strategic. I tell you, another thing your daughter could have as a game is to take an approach to friendship that lets the other person be the first one to say, you want to be friends, if that's something we say. Sometimes most of us just wake up and we are friends. Usually in dating, you know, we finally go, one of them has to say, I love you, you know, and it may not always, you know, you may take a posture that says, I'm going to always make them say it first. I don't know. But if she approaches it as a friendship game, you know, just like winning it, it doesn't happen instantly. You're not going to be friends with everyone, but you give it room. You give it room to blossom, and you give it a little time. So be brave, but be smart, right? So, you know, brave, but smart. That's the way I would, I'd suggest you kind of talk about it. Zeta throws out, I'm all over the place and raising kids age 7 girls, 10 girl, 12 boy. So we had a boy, girl, boy, boy, boy. All are very outgoing in their stages here at home. Outside home, their personalized or personalities are way different, of course. It's very interesting. Yeah, and it is, because it's situational. So people that are one way in one context can go another context and be another way. My boys, I remember doing, they were grumpy towards their sister one day. We'd moved down here, they're teens, and they went out on a boat, one of the lakes, with some family they had met, and the boys were complaining to me how fakey Laura was. Laura was so fakey, you know, she wasn't her. Well, that's not exactly on target. I think Laura was Laura, and she was great at it. But Laura being Laura actually means, in a context, she was a different critter, you know, because the context called for it. So she's suddenly friendly. She's suddenly nicer in a different way to new people. And that's how we are. I'll give you another example. It's how we are with babies. You know, you have grown, dignified people go up to a baby and say, hey, baby, goo goo gaga. What do you do? Oh, are you happy? Oh, are you upset? Oh, is that so good? Oh, my daughter-in-law will say that about food to the babies. Is that so good? Does that taste so good? And but what you're doing is you're relating to a child on a level where they are, because it's a baby, and chances are they're cooing and you coo back, and they're doing some of their eyes and you do back. Y'all are in an interaction, but you're putting on a baby personality. And that's exactly the way the game goes. That some, you know, when we can learn the skills and in the context, depending on what we want, you know, people that want people to leave them alone, they stand in the corner and face it. And they aren't reaching out. You know, they may secretly want someone to come rescue them, like a damsel in distress. But when you figure out what you want, you know, do you want guys to say hi to you and talk, or do you want to dance, or I'm just thinking of that kind of thing. Then you need to figure out how to be friendly. Like, you know, it could start with one of these. Like, do you want to approach someone that's frowning at you? No. So as Laura and I used to practice, we also learned to smile with our eyes. So it wasn't just this, it was our eyes. And of course, she's a promoter and salesperson, all the rest, because she's got that skill personality going. So it's quite cool. True, she might have caught them off guard and they never blatantly asked. Exactly. So the about the friendship thing. Let me switch to this question that I got this morning. Okay, so it's from Jamie. And Jamie wrote, thanks for the show. Here's some context and then my question. So we're going to get a question, but we're going to get context first. My 6-year-old thinks school might be the most fun any kid has ever had on the planet. We had that too, and it might very well be. But she says on the planet, like Chuck E. Cheese every day, she feels she's missing out. My husband and I feel there are no good schools as we live in Canada, and I probably inflected that wrong, not no good schools, but no good schools as we live in Canada. And the agenda is against our belief system. Indeed, we're, well, I can just say all this. We are Catholic, and there are few private Catholic schools. They're far away and incredibly expensive. Additionally, I'm American and want my child to have pride in being an American. Local public Catholic schools are very socialistic, anti-American. And that's obviously going to vary with the situation, and have low outcomes based on national standards. Even if all of these factors were not issues, my daughter is quite dreamy, active, and artsy. And her doctor said she would likely be put in special ed, even though she doesn't have any learning disabilities. They call it ISA. I tried to look that up. Maybe Jamie will tell us, but I think it's a certification thing. It means you don't fit the mold. Okay. At home, she has personalized curriculum and experience, licensed teacher as her tutor, me, and she can do art, ballet, piano, voice, and nature studies as the bulk of her school day. She goes to activities, co-op, Sunday school, and the library often. I can't conceive of a way to make her schooling more idyllic. So there's the setup. And the question, how do you recommend I deal with the constant pushback from her? My husband's family is negative about homeschooling, so I wonder if that's where it comes from. Thanks for your listening ear. All right, so here we are with someone who, bottom line, says school sounds like it'd be more fun than home, right? I want to go to school. I want to do something. Now, and so then she's engaged in complaining or nagging or crying or wishing or talking about it all the time or making vision boards and putting up in her room. She's artsy. I've done a new ballet on why school is wonderful and homeschool is bad. Who knows what she does? Okay. So she's got all that stuff going on for her. But here's what you can know about human beings. If you see a behavior like that, you can tell that she thinks there's a chance. And so if you can get her to understand there's not a chance, I mean, there are a couple of ways to go. So let me back up. So first of all, she might need to understand the nature of schooling, because let me tell you what school is going to be. It's going to be sitting in your desk. It's going to be doing homework. You're going to be a bus and this and that. You can map out how much time she's got, how much less fun time she would have, how certain activities would be cut out. And just to really understand the story. We did that with our son who wanted to go to school. We even let him go to school for a day or two to visit. He was older. And yet when I sat down and showed him the math of what he was going to have to do and how long he'd be gone and had to get back, et cetera, and what the game was compared to ours, where you're done at 12:30 every day and you've got the rest of the afternoon, evening free, no homework, no nothing. Once he did the math and realized how much time, even with working the summer, the math worked out, it was all consuming because you got almost, it's 6, 7, 8 or 9 hours. Well, with homework, 10 hours a day, like double the time with school, at least in our context. So you could go over that with, she's only 6, so she may not get all that, but you can say, here's what you'd lose. So understand that. So, you get things, but you miss things. But actually, I would say it's going to be better to convince her that she's not going to do school. Now, this is tricky because if you're like me, I would just say, yeah, sorry, grow up, get school for your kids, have life. But this is not what we're doing. What we want to do is use all your ability to make this fun, right? So let's make this fun rather than you trying to go somewhere to have fun. In fact, your whole life's that, sweetheart. I want you to learn how to have fun no matter what's going on, right? Mary Poppins, we need to whistle while we work. Spoonful of sugar with medicine. We got to figure out how to endure these things we don't like. However, the easier path would be to say to her, I tell you what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do school. We got this year and next. We're going to do school for 2 years. That's 2 grades. Let's just say I'm right about this. 2 grades. And then we're going to sit down and then talk about it. And I promise you we will. We'll set it on the calendar. So we'll set on the calendar. We're going to set on the calendar July 4th after your second year of school. So you get America in there. And so, or you can do it on Boxing Day. I don't really care. But you can do that and just say, now between then and now, it's not going to happen. We're just not doing it. And we're going to have more understanding of what you're about and school's about, what you've learned and how we make this work. So we got this 2-year period, 2 grades, and we'll talk about it then. Not saying we will, but not saying we won't. We'll honestly talk about it. But between now and then, we're not going to talk about it. It's over. Because then the child knows they can't have it. And people don't try for what they know they can't have. And a lot of what happens when kids keep nagging all, they still think they got a chance. It's like the movie Dumb and Dumber when she said something like, I wouldn't go with you, 1 in a million, or Last Man on Earth, something. And he said, oh, I still got a chance. So that's how humans operate. So that's the way I would start kind of thinking about it, as well as emphasizing, what do you like about our school? What is fun? So, that contrast is a piece of it. Hope that helps. Let's see. What other questions? Can't minimize Zoom. Sorry about that. Let's see here. 6th grade, centering stuck. Thanks for helpful advice. Good, Heather. I'm glad that was helpful. All right. I've got 10 more minutes. Whatever else is online or is on your mind. And if anybody on Zoom wants to chat, I'm available. If you have any questions here, go for it. As I said, Jody is dealing with she's leading a breakfast tomorrow morning. And so as a result, she's not with us. Yeah, a lot of all of this with homeschooling is learning how to motivate our children. And motivation really isn't that complicated. It's mostly about connecting something on the outside to something on the inside. And the inside of what they want, intrinsic motivation, the inside, the trick is actually giving them a vision or a frame or way to think of it, or fresh understanding. Because the moment they can understand something, they make sense of it. Or the moment you give them a new idea, they're all the better, So I've found, at least with our kids, that I might tell them things that are coming. Like I don't like to throw surprises on them. Those are fun, but I get more mileage if we're gonna do something. If we're going on a museum trip, let's say, I'd like them to know a number of days out, because that gets them enjoying looking forward to it. It kind of organizes their thinking. And then the work we're doing in school, so we can take this day off, and do museum, it all fits together for them. And so I'm always kind of thinking about what would motivate them. How would they do better? What would be good for them? So if they interrupted me, I didn't say I'm busy. I'm saying, if you'll give me 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or, if you'll give me a moment, I've got to finish this up. Then I'm going to come out and look at what you did. And so that anticipation works too. So constantly playing with what people want. And a lot of times you need to find it out, just to find out what they want. Now, sometimes if they want crazy stuff. Like, Jody used to do Jody's Deli. So she cooked different things for all the kids. And as we got more kids, you got 5, you can't have a deli. And so we figured out to some degree what they want, but they understood that inside the boundaries of it all, they're going to have to learn to, sometimes the meal's great, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's your favorite, sometimes it's not one of your favorites. What I've found, just like with me and water, I don't really like water, but when I'm thirsty, it tastes pretty good. So, if we don't over snack our kids or whatever else, food's pretty good. The way we're wired, we're usually kind of appreciative, and understanding that game, that you get their wants within frame, of sanity, and help them direct them. It's magical for life. So they ask, when do you think it's time to send a child to school? When homeschool doesn't work at home? Well, that's a good answer. If homeschool doesn't work at home, I think that's the right one. But what I think you're looking at is, if you have a situation where either the child has challenges that you're unable to meet, and challenges can be on a learning or behavioral level. It could be advanced too. It could be someone that's just too bright for their own good. That's usually not a problem, because you can just feed them more books, etc., until it's time. But for the most part, what I've seen when I've helped moms and dads stop homeschooling, it's because not so much about the children, it's really about the parents. They just weren't doing a good job. It was chaotic. They weren't consistent. The children weren't learning. They weren't learning to read. They weren't learning to get somewhere. We had some friends that this was happening with their homeschool. And what we discovered was that she had frontal temporal disorder, like a Pick's disease. So basically, it's like Alzheimer's, but for a younger person around 40. And it just is on steroids. It just goes so fast. And she wasn't able to keep her thoughts together. She would park the car in the middle. It was a really tough thing, but she was just, her brain was deteriorating. And they were way behind by the time we caught it. But the dad, nobody knew what was going on. And so the assumptions were something, and could have caught on to it. So we took these kids in the home for 2-3 months, I think, and really got them up to snuff. It may have been a little longer, up to a place we could get them in the school. But with mom's deteriorating situation, couldn't do it. So if you can't do homeschool, or can't do it how it needs to be done, or won't, I'll go with that, but usually it's can't, then you don't need to be homeschooling. If you have a vision, and if you're like-minded, mom and dad, then what you need is a plan, a game plan, and interject some consistency to it, so you can, and then specifically measure, are the kids learning? And if your kids aren't learning every, week to week, they're consistently improving, you're going to need to take a different approach somehow. Now, intermediate to that could be a classical, one of these models that you might want to do that are not exactly putting them in school, but more of a hybrid type thing. I don't call that homeschooling. That's me. It's somehow related to it, but seems like, I don't know, homeschool. Wouldn't it be in the home? I don't know. I'm crazy. So that's just how I think about the whole thing. But I'm for education. So, I've nephew in classical stuff. It's great. I have other friends. I mean, I'm cheering for all of them. Just let's get them educated. Okay. Let us teach them to think. Let them teach them to teach themselves. And then I think we're going to be golden. That's my plan. All right. What other questions about any of this stuff? I got time for one more, it looks like. I do hope things are going well. I do want to encourage you, if you hadn't checked it out, to look at certainly our stuff at independenthomeschool.com. A lot of videos on this YouTube site that deal with these very things. How do you motivate kids? Click the button if you can sort them by favorites, or just search in this site. You can find, I did a lot about motivation, about how to organize things, etc. So there's all kinds of information. But I'll tell you, you get an insight And that insight can change your life. You know, the fish aren't biting. You change lures, the fish are biting. That's kind of the whole story. Something's not working. Let's change a little thing, see what works. And I'm going to tell you more than anything, it's about the motivation of those kids, getting them to understand, here's what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get you to be a happy adult. If you're a happy kid, that's great too. But I'm trying to get you to grow up. There are things that come with school that we don't want. There are things that come with school that might be fun. There are things you get to get out and decide your own life. You know, there are things we didn't do. We weren't big on, I didn't play Halloween. I didn't play April Fool's Day. They may have done something Valentine's-y. But in not doing that, we didn't particularly play the guy in the red suit that gave gifts. We didn't do that. But I told them all that when they grow up, you can do all that. It's your life. We found one of the kids in the corner one day said, man, when I grow up, I want to do Halloween and this and this. He had a whole list. And I said, great, work on it. You got goals. I love them. It's awesome. Totally awesome. All right, let me check one more time. All right, you've got enough questions, apparently. I don't see any more. You had enough answered. I'll let you go 4 minutes early. Hey, do me a favor and share this with others. If you find it helpful. And don't forget to email us if you're on our mailing list. If you're not, go to independenthomeschool.com and sign up for the free videos, and you'll be in the list and we'll get to know stuff. But it's all great stuff. And I want to stress, someone said, thanks, going to share with my co-op, do that. And let me be clear, I'm a fan of co-ops. They work. That's great. I want people to get educated. We're just especially about wanting to grow kids that can think independently, that can teach themselves, to get to adulthood and they're ready to retool for every job, learn what they need to learn, go through life as a constant learner. That's really the outcome of a good education in my mind. So anyway, God bless y'all. Jody will be back, I'm pretty sure, next week, and look forward to it then.